Welcome to another Soccer Down Here 1v1. My name's Jason Longshore. Here with me today, Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic. What's up, Felipe?
Hey, man. Doing well. How are you?
Doing well. We've got lots of stuff to talk about. It won't be Atlanta United related this time. Maybe next week, depending on the dark arts and chaos and everything that will happen at Mercedes-Benz on Sunday. But take that, multiply it by about 300, and you have what's going to happen in Buenos Aires on Saturday afternoon for the Copa Libertadores final first leg, Boca Juniors hosting River Plate. It will be on TV in the United States, FOX Deportes, 3 o'clock kick time Eastern, 2:30 pre-match coverage starts there. If you don't have FOX Deportes, you can watch on Fanatiz.com. It's a monthly subscription, highly recommended for Libertadores, Sudamericana, the Argentine League, the Chilean League. It's great service. Highly recommended. So you can watch it. I know the Fido Irish pub locations, both Buckhead and Midtown, will be able to show the game. If you want to go, get there a little early, grab a TV, ask a manager, bartender to put the game on for you, and they will have it. That is 100% confirmed. So, Felipe, let's get into the full context here. This is the first time Boca and River have met in a Copa Libertadores final, but let's take a step back. This has been a contentious tournament, as I guess it always is, but you had a lot of controversy even in the last couple of rounds to get to this all-Argentine final. The Brazilian clubs and the Brazilian media are not exactly thrilled with the situation that starts on Saturday.
No, and for obvious reasons that go kind of beyond just, a tournament pitch. I mean, the semifinals were pitting Argentina against Brazil, which, it's probably the most intense footballing rivalry in the world. I mean, we can argue all day about that, but it is extremely important to these two countries that their top clubs are crowned South American champions. And so, the semifinals between Boca Juniors and Palmeiras, and then Gremio and River Plate. I mean, these are just 4 massive powerhouses on the continent that for several reasons, from whether or not it's just kind of a dip in form and quality in South America, these countries haven't really, they haven't been as perennial as far as getting to the Final Four and getting to the championship as years past. But, they're back in it. And, what happened in those semifinals, there was plenty of controversy kind of surrounding VAR and stoppage time. And we had Marcelo Gallardo, who was suspended for the final, the second leg, with his team losing, coming in, losing 1-0, needing a result. And he essentially violated his touchline and locker room ban. And first of all, he was communicating via walkie-talkie with one of his assistants, and then he just blatantly made his way down to the locker room, to coach his team, at halftime. So the Brazilian supporters, the press covered it. But really, the club directors for Gremio were just, appalled and essentially labeled him a cheat. And so that really just made things a lot more intense. But, on the field, the players delivered. The players, whatever he said to them at halftime, and whatever the message was in training, knowing that he was not going to be on the stand, or on the touchline, River Plate players were just, all of them were locked in, and they did a great job beating a very good, Gremio side in Brazil. So yeah, I think, both semifinals had a little bit of that. I think Palmeiras and Boca Juniors was really a bunch more tactical and kind of a classic South American semifinal that saw, the favorite. Boca is the favorite here, and they got through. In the end, it looked like it was going to be a little bit more comfortable than it was, but they were well-deserved victors.
Yeah, the incident in the Boca Cruzeiro series was the center back from Cruzeiro who was sent off in the first game using video assistant referees, which are part of the Copa Libertadores. Then it was rescinded, and he played in the second half, or in the second match, and he was sent off in the second match again. So It was kind of chaos with Cruzeiro.
Yeah, I mean, I think here in the States, we there are a lot of puns and jokes about like, ooh, that was very CONCACAF-y and things like that. I mean, that was like an example that's CONMEBOL, right in front of everyone to see. Like some decisions you just don't comprehend, but they happen, and they've happened in this tournament, even such a prestigious tournament as Copa Libertadores is. Some wild occurrences are always part of the tournament, and that was definitely one of them.
So we can't do justice to the whole Boca River rivalry in the short period of time that we have. There have been documentaries, there have been books, there have been stories written. They're out there. There's a couple great documentary series about the Boca River rivalry and everything that's happened in it. Opposing fans will not be in either stadium for this, and this is not exactly. Like, I think it shocked a lot of people who aren't familiar with it, but this is not exactly new. Visiting fans have only been allowed back in games this season, right, in Argentina, and not even involving the big teams.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it is somewhat common, seeing big matches in Argentina and in South America, but particularly in Argentina, where the two clubs, the visiting supporters for one of the clubs are not allowed in the stadium just for safety concerns. Recently, if I'm not mistaken, there was a Copa Argentina match between two huge blood rivals, between Newell's Old Boys and Rosario Central. I mean, you ask those fans, you ask Tata Martino, he'll probably tell you that's much bigger than Boca River. It is that massive of a rivalry, and they played closed doors, no fans at all, just a few weeks ago. So, I think for the American public, sometimes that is hard to comprehend. And I think for soccer fans in America, they understand what hooliganism is, and they kind of get that definition and their history from Europe. And there have been, classic cases of big tournaments, including World Cups and European Championships, where hooliganism has left a really bad stain on a tournament. In South America, that is unfortunately something that is still a problem, just at the league level, at the domestic league level, at the a weekend game, where that is still a problem as far as violence, just disruption, and really just the fan experience for people that just want to go to the game with their families. It becomes something that they need to consider. So. I am not surprised that the biggest tournament final in South American history, they've taken that measure, and they will not allow supporters from the visiting fans in La Bombonera and in the second leg in the Monumental. So it's just something that has to be done, unfortunately. But I really don't see it taken away from the spectacle.
No, not at all. I mean, let's hit a couple of the highlights in recent years between these two. You had Carlos Tevez red-carded after doing a chicken dance after scoring against River in the Libertadores semifinal in 2004. River is known as the Chickens because of past failures in this tournament. 2012, you had River fans delaying the second half of the Super Classico by floating an inflatable pig in Boca colors in front of the away fans, and then that factored into some violence with Boca fans reacting violently to the stewards, and it goes back to Boca being known as Los Bosteros, and we can talk about what that is. It's basically piles of manure used in the brick industry that used to dominate that area around where Boca is at.
It's very creative.
Yeah, there's that. And then in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, Boca and River met in the Libertadores, and match was called off at La Bombonera because River Plate players were attacked with pepper spray in the tunnel, and Boca was kicked out of the tournament. So, if you're wondering about what's on the line on Saturday, or starting to be on the line on Saturday, that's just the last few times these teams have met in high stakes. That doesn't take the decades and decades of previous history. It's as big a rivalry as it gets in world sport.
It is. It simply, there's no other answer than that it is. And it goes beyond the pitch, like we've talked, several times, since leading up to this game. The players grew up in it as well. They have family members and grandparents and uncles and brothers and sisters that are probably in their ear weekly, just getting them ready for a game like this. And they're fans just like us. I mean, if they weren't in uniform, they would be in the stands with their shirts off, chanting and insulting the other team. So they bring that to the field. They bring that to the pitch. Sometimes it all gets mixed together, and you have tournament bans and some really ugly scenes. But I think for the casual neutral, these are just fun tidbits to know, so that when you see the game on Sunday, you can understand that the pressure that not just the players are under, but that the fans are feeling. Bragging rights is just putting it mildly. I mean, it really is, but that's what it comes down to. It's essentially bragging rights, at an astronomical level. And I have a funny story that takes that rivalry, and you see it in other games as well. So there's a long history of Colombian players playing for both teams and starring for both Boca Juniors and River Plate. Some became icons. Others just kind of had a stint. And one of those players that had a brief stint with River Plate very recently, his name is Teófilo Gutiérrez, and he actually played in the 2014 World Cup for Colombia, had a goal, had an assist. He actually had an assist against Ivory Coast, and the goal scorer was Juan Fernando Quintero. At the time, he was a young, I think a 19-year-old just coming onto the scene for Colombia. But so Gutierrez played for River Plate, and he's very controversial off the field and on the field. So, but he played well for them, and the River Plate fans really embraced him and his attitude. And he's kind of come in and out of Argentina, and most recently he came back to Argentina after playing in Colombia. He played for Rosario Central, and in a game as a player for Rosario Central against Boca Juniors, after he scored against Boca Juniors, he went to a corner flag and made a sign like as if he were drawing a red, like a stripe, a diagonal stripe across his chest. Obviously, symbolizing La Banda from, River Plate, that the iconic red stripe on their jersey. And the Boca Juniors players went nuts. Like they confronted him. The players had to be separated. The game was delayed for several minutes. Carlos Tevez, you just mentioned, lost his mind. Players just wanted to go at him. They wanted to essentially brawl because of that celebration. So it's like there's like this disrespect that comes about in these types of matches that players have to deal with. And I don't know what we'll see, in these legs, honestly. Like part of me tells me that it's just going to be kind of a nervy affair, like a tight match that and very tactical, with two coaches that have been part of this, both as players and coaches. And I think they'll prepare their teams to just play. But that doesn't mean that the history behind the team should not be, talked about.
Yeah, it factors in. I mean, it factors into the fan base as well. Like, I think a lot of people look at this and they go to hooligans and they go to what they've seen out of England or different groups in Europe. This to me feels so different. It's just the passion for the team and the club spilling over in a very awful way, but it's not organized gang type of violence. There is that, and that's a whole different thing about South American football. But right. The basic passion of it is what it is, and it gets out of control. And that's something both teams will have to be able to manage in both legs of this. I'm with you. I could see the first leg on Saturday being kind of cagey because both teams, both sets of players, both managers are a little worried about where it could go if it's not under control.
Agree. And also just the fact that, in the last time these two teams played was very recently in a domestic league, Super Clásico, at La Bombonera, which is, the iconic stadium for Boca Juniors. And River Plate really just walked all over Boca. I mean, they came in with this just the swagger and just really took it to the home team, took it to Boca Juniors. And Boca Juniors played like a team that was nervous in front of their own fans. which we see that a lot in sports, in every sport. Sometimes, just to talk about Atlanta United, sometimes they play like that. They've had opportunities where they're at home and kind of the pressure of being home and the expectations of being at home and the fact that you're supposed to play fast and you're supposed to score a lot of goals. Sometimes when those things don't happen, players start to get tight and the opposing team takes advantage of that type of, just personality characteristics. So, if you go back to just the last time Boca and River played really well on Boca's, home field and came out 2-0 winners. So I think that'll be in both teams' minds. River will be saying, we just did this, they can bring more fans. This can be heightened as high, as intense as you want it, but we just beat them 2-0. So I really think it's up to Boca Juniors to erase that performance, from their minds, and really, come out and play like, the favorite, in my opinion, that they are.
So a couple of things to keep in mind as you go into this, if you're watching for the first time. There is no extra time at the end of the second leg if both teams are level. Away goals count, but there's no extra time. It goes straight to penalties. It is 2 legs. It's not a final like the Champions League final where it's just one game. It's 2 legs. Second leg will be in 2 weeks at Monumental River Plate Stadium. And this is the last time it will be over 2 legs, at least for the foreseeable future. CONMEBOL is going to a single-game final for the Libertadores and the Sudamericana starting next year. Also, yellow card accumulation comes into play. It doesn't get wiped out going into the final. Both teams have players who are 1 yellow card away from being suspended in the second leg of the final. And key players, Pity Martinez, Enzo Perez, Lucas Prato, all for River, Pavon, Nandez, Olaza, all for Boca. That's going to play into this first leg as well. I think it makes it very tricky for the managers coming into it.
Absolutely. You said it on Soccer Down Here this week that, at this point in the season and when the stakes are this high, I think you really just have to go and play. And if you get that yellow and you're suspended, you're doing it for the team. You're doing it for, the end result of winning a championship. Because if you play, if you're apprehensive and you're trying not to foul and you're trying not to get noticed by the referee, you're just not playing your game. And so that'll be interesting to see how those players are managed by their respective coaches. We don't know what Bartos Escalota or Gallardo, what they're telling those players that are on yellow. Are they telling them to be careful, or are they telling them to just go out and play? So I think we'll get a sense of that. We'll see that really early, and see how that impacts the match. But yeah, to your point, I think that the fact that this is a 2-leg final, that absolutely plays into the way that the tactics will be, essentially formulated for both teams. River traditionally in this tournament, in this year's tournament, has done well away from home, and very much like Atlanta United, they when they're at home, they go after it immediately, and they've tended to play on the road a little bit more defensive, very defensive in fact, but just as dangerous in the attack, and they can counter pretty well with the players that they have. But they're sound defensively, and I think they're very comfortable in that type of tactic where they know that they're going to have to absorb pressure and try to manage on some kind of counter. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, just how the teams come out, in this first leg, especially.
Yeah, you have to expect that's going to be the case here with Boca losing that league match, about a month or 2 ago against River. And this is their chance at home in front of their fans to get something going into the second leg. The guy who's been doing that for Boca Juniors here lately is Dario Benedetto. He's been in a great run of form, was a huge factor in getting Boca Juniors here. Besides Benedetto, who else is it for Boca that has to be big tomorrow?
Well, I mean, Benedetto's the man. I think he's still not 100% fit. He's coming off a pretty, serious knee injury at the end of last season, right before the World Cup. I think he was, he probably would have been in the Argentine squad, but that kept him out of the World Cup. So he's still rehabilitating. But when he comes on, you just see the quality. And I think what, Barros Escalota has done is he's kind of bringing him on late in the game, to really finish off teams, because he's a player that just has a nose for goal. He'll shoot from anywhere, but he's a top quality player. So he will be important. I would be surprised if we see him in the starting lineup actually tomorrow. But other players for Boca that need to step up, I think. And this is, let's just be frank. Both teams have injuries. Both teams are banged up after a long domestic season, so they're trying to get fit for this game. So that'll be something to watch out for. But let's start with Boca. I mean, I think that their front three, that they usually run out in a 4-3-3, their front three needs to be clinical and needs to make a difference. So that's Cristian Pavón, who played in the World Cup for Argentina, a young player with a really bright future. He has to be on, and when he's on, he's very good. Who plays centrally? That could be Benedetto, but it could also be Abida, who's kind of like this big, stocky central number 9 that kind of just does damage playing with his back to goal, and kind of lurks in the box and looks for those crosses from Pavón, and then their right winger, who's the Colombian Sebastián Villa. So Villa is a new player, and he came on this season, and he has quickly become a fan favorite because he's all he knows how to do is play direct and play quickly. He has speed to kill. He can burn down the touchline, and he's essentially competing for that spot with a much more established player in Mauro Zarate, who has played in Italy, played in Europe, and he came back to Boca this season. So I think those are that front three will be if I were a fan, not knowing much about the team, focus on those guys and see if they can do damage. And then for River, we mentioned, first of all, if they play the way they should play, which they probably will absorb a lot of pressure defensively. Their back four is very good. They have one of the best goalies, if not the top goalkeeper in South America. In my opinion, he is a top 5 goalkeeper in the world. We just don't know much about him, but he won this tournament for Nacional in Colombia. Colombia's top, really their biggest club. And he's very good. He's won everything in his career. He could retire tomorrow and he'd be fine. So Franco Armani is River Plate's goalie, very good keeper.
Should have been first choice for Argentina in the World Cup.
Yeah,
they just didn't trust him early on. It was ridiculous.
Absolutely, because it's like his career, he won so much late in his career. He's in his 30s already, and he wasn't even capped during during those performances. And so he gets the late cap before the World Cup. And to your point, he obviously should have just walked in and been an automatic starter, and we saw how that worked out for Argentina. And so River, again, they are a very creative team. They're a team that relies on creativity, on quick attacks, and really a midfield that can do a lot. They can kind of defend zonally, but they're players that want to be on the ball. They want to play technically. And so, Ezequiel Palacios is a hot commodity, a young player who's rumored to be, Real Madrid is very interested in him. And he's kind of like an 8, like he can do a little bit of defending, but he's a guy that likes to get on the ball and kind of distribute and be in key positions where maybe his final ball or his second to last ball is actually leading to a goal. You mentioned Pity Martinez. We should see him from the start. But again, Gallardo tends to rotate Quintero and Pity Martinez. So it'll see who starts there and who comes on later. And then I really like to focus on Rivers, forwards. I think that they are kind of like the unsung heroes of this team. We talk a lot about Pity and Quintero and Armani and their strong defense, but they have forwards that are a mix of youth and just, true veterans in Skoko and Borrés, the Colombian, a young Colombian who has just really come on for them. So, there are a lot of players to look at, but if I were to split it down the middle, check out Boca Juniors front three in that 4-3-3. And then focus on River Plate's midfield and see if they can manage the pressure in the middle of the field.
And we'll catch up ahead of the second leg to look maybe a little bit deeper, since River will probably carry the play there. Boca stylistically, 4-3-3, high pressure, high energy. I mean, is there a team you'd maybe compare it to for somebody who hasn't seen much of Boca Juniors this year?
That is a good question. Let's see.
I mean, it's a press, but it's not like a New York Red Bull style press.
Right. I mean, okay. And so I'll say this, and this is not a straight comparison, but
sure.
Let's go out of MLS. Like I look at like a traditional like Chelsea side, for instance, that likes to attack, likes to press, likes to play ball on the ground. But, really before Mauricio Sarri came on and really is essentially changing the philosophy of Chelsea, before him, they really always relied on two, central defensive midfielders that could do, just work all around the pitch. And so they had N'Golo Kante, Fabregas has kind of like been in and around that position as well. I mean, I think Boca is a team, to your point, that they do press and they do attack. And when they attack, they're pretty lethal. But they are also, that 4-3-3 sometimes becomes a traditional 4-4-2 because they have players like Barrios, another Colombian who's just, he's just a terror as a number 6. He's so good. He can tackle, he can distribute, and he's very important to the stability of that formation. And he always has someone next to him who also really leans defensively. So Pablo Perez is another midfielder that good on the ball, but really he's just there to cover space and tackle and distribute. So they have two guys that are doing those roles. So, it's somewhat traditional South American 4-4-2 kind of disguised in a 4-3-3 when they attack. So, and I think of Chelsea because Chelsea always has a strong central midfield, but they're just, we think of them and we think, they have, Hazard and they've had just like, and Drogba and all these great attackers. But their central midfield for years has been excellent. So that is a key for Boca as well. But we kind of know what we're going to get from those two guys.
And they're going to be key. I mean, Boca's got to get something out of this. I think a loss, and it's going to be really difficult for them to turn it around in 2 weeks and get anything and lift a trophy. A draw minimum, a win is really what they need here in the first leg to set the tone. It's going to be a wild one from La Bombonera. FOX Deportes has it in the U.S., 3 o'clock-ish kickoff time. I know pre-match is going to start at 2:30. If you don't have FOX Deportes, you can get it on Fanatiz legally in the United States. It's a $9.99 a month monthly subscription. There might be some kind of first month free, something like that. I'm not positive. But check this game out. If you're looking for a game to watch tomorrow, it will be unlike anything you've seen if you don't watch South American competition on the regular. And Felipe, let's touch base maybe in the week ahead of the second leg and see where things stand and talk a little bit more about River and kind of how Gallardo sets them up in that match.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll say quickly, I grew up, like my dad has always been a big Boca fan. He was a big fan, especially of Carlos Bianchi, who, iconic manager for them that won 3 Copa Libertadores, in the early 2000s. He won 4 total. He's the only manager to ever win 4. He won another in 94 with Vélez. So my dad, I kind of grew up, idolizing Boca Juniors. And I had a dislike for River as well, even though both teams have always had, strong Colombian presence, in big matches. So, but this year feels different. Obviously I will be supporting Boca. I want them to win, but this River Plate team, there's something about them that just, it's hard for me to dislike them. And I think that's really interesting. I think that adds to really the buildup of this match and the new generation of this Clásico where, River, young team, academy built, but they have like a streetwise sense to them that makes them very dangerous. And then Boca is just, they're Boca. They have the players, they have, the management there, the money. And so that all comes together for a huge final.
It's wild how it's flipped. I mean, River Plate was the millionaires, La Máquina, all the greats. Boca was the scrappy underdog team that was always trying to just keep things together. And now they're in completely different roles. Boca is the team with all the money and all the stars. River is the team with a lot of guys they've developed in-house and kind of the young, scrappy group. So the tails are always turning in the Argentine Superliga and in the Copa Libertadores. It's going to be a blast. We'll be talking about it on SDH next week for sure, but we'll get together again for another 1v1 ahead of leg 2 on November 24th. Felipe, thanks for the time, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Anytime, Jason.
And we'll be talking to you guys later on. Thanks for listening to another 1v1 here at Soccer Down Here.